Hello, I'm Superintendent Christopher Flanagan of the Radnor Township Police Department. Welcome to Radnor Studio 21. Today we'll be talking about the flooding that occurred on August 13th, 2018. I'd like to introduce our very distinguished group that are going to help bring us up to speed on what's going on with the situation of the flooding that occurred on that day. Mr. Zienkowski, how are you, sir?
Good, Chris. Yourself?
I'm doing wonderful. Good. Thank you for coming today. If you could just introduce yourself to the audience and tell them what you're doing here today.
Sure. I'm Bob Zienkowski. I'm the Township Manager for Radnor Township. I'm responsible for the day-to-day duties of the Township, of all the activities that take place. I carry out the priorities for the Board of Commissioners and work hard for the residents of Radnor Township.
Thank you. Sounds like you're a pretty busy guy.
Just a little bit.
To your left, Mr. Larry Bach.
Good morning, Chris. My name is Larry Bach. I'm the Deputy Director of Emergency Management for Delaware County. Our primary function in emergency management at the county level is to support the 49 municipal emergency management coordinators when they have events such as the flooding event that occurred recently. Could be a snow event or major fire or any type of event which kind of overwhelms local resources.
Thank you, Larry. Very glad to have everybody here. What I'd like to do for the audience is lay out what happened and also following that, because there's important steps that really occur 24 hours to months after a major incident occurs. And I appreciate both of you guys being here. To remind the audience, on August 13th, approximately 7:45 in the morning, Radnor Township and several other communities in Montgomery and Delaware County were struck by a very severe sudden rain downpour, which caused local flooding on a small scale and on a major scale throughout all the communities, but specifically Radnor. During that time frame, Radnor Township Police responded over 100 incidents that we were able to count. Out of that 100 incidents, 28 of them were water rescues, where Radnor Fire Company, Bryn Mawr Fire Company, Radnor Police, Radnor Public Works were stretched to a maximum, attempting to rescue people from various locations, whether it be driving a car in a flooded stream that suddenly overcame a roadway, or people who were stuck in their houses due to severe flooding. That obviously stretched everybody to a maximum capacity. And I think that I'd ask Mr. Zienkowski to give an update to the community on what you saw on that day at that particular time.
Sure. I know I received the phone call very early that water was starting to rise. Went out, and it was just probably one of the biggest flood events in my time that I've been here over the last 8 years. Of water just inundated the township at such a heavy rate. I know that we had some of our residents submit in some of our local businesses of the rainfall amounts, and it ranged anywhere in the township from 3 to 7 inches of water that had come down during that event. Roads were overwhelmed, as you had just mentioned, and I know that between Public Works, police, all the emergency personnel, fire, as you said, we were stretched to the max, and I know we were trying to close off streets anywhere and everywhere we could, try to redirect traffic under such a severe flooding type situation.
Okay, so Radnor Township had their hands full. Larry, since you represent the county, could you give us a picture of what August 13th around that time frame looked like?
Well, this event, and this is one of those things where you hear the weathermen talk about, locally heavy storm cells, supercells even. But this event largely struck the Darby Creek watershed. So it came down through Radnor, Haverford, Marple, Springfield, Upper Darby, Darby. And those are the towns that we largely saw impacts in. Folks on the other watersheds really didn't see much. The Brandywine Creek, which is usually one of our key indicators, didn't even really get up that high over top of Route 1, which is always, that's a difficult situation. But it largely struck this east end of the county. We saw, as Bob said, we saw 3 to 7 inches of rain. It overwhelms the local storm systems. We're very old communities. Our stormwater systems haven't quite caught up to where they need to be. The floodplains, and it's one of our greatest issues, is that the floodplains were okay when we weren't as well developed. I mean, you always run into somebody who can say, I can remember when Lancaster Avenue was a 2-lane road. Okay, that's when that infrastructure went into place. And then, unless we go and start taking everybody's homes away and their businesses away, we can't fix that. So that overwhelms the local stormwater systems and causes issues, as we saw then. You know, you get the floodwater rising up because of that quick inundation. It just can't handle the flow.
Do want to throw a tip in there, Mr. Zienkowski, for the audience. If you see a flooded roadway, you're in your vehicle, we get this very sudden flood from this torrential downpour that occurred. What's the best advice for a driver in that situation?
Don't even drive through it. Don't even attempt it. It's a dangerous situation. You don't know what you're going into of the depth, and I think we experienced that in this last storm of drivers not realizing the depth of the water and water being at least up to over the hood of their vehicles with some of these. So anytime you see a flooded roadway, it's best to avoid it. Do not drive through it. Do not attempt to drive through it or walk through it. I know at several points being out there, I was asking people not to walk through the flooded waters because, again, you don't know what's under that water, slippery to the surface. We had some areas where manholes actually had popped off because the system had surcharged and actually popped manholes off, so you don't know what you're walking into. It's a very dangerous situation, so we would ask anybody who's driving or walking, please avoid any kind of flooded roadways, sidewalks, anything during those situations.
And Chris, the mantra that we always use and we put into our social media, turn around, don't drown. Yeah, and we just keep, every time it starts to rain, we put that up into our social media. Turn around, don't drown. Right up there with wipers on, headlights on. But that's very true. You have no idea. Actually, in the storms that hit last Friday out in Lancaster and the South Central area, there was a woman who was trying to be a good Samaritan who was taking a rope out to a car so they could try to pull the car out of the floodwaters. The floodwaters rose up and carried her away, and she died. So, she's just wading through ankle-deep water. But the speed of that water will take you out.
And especially in this last one, we saw the high volume of water in such a short period of time. The homes that were impacted, the businesses that were impacted, and the flow rate of water is just absolutely was incredible. And it's one of the things that the Board of Commissioners are committed to working on. There's several big projects right now that Larry had talked about, upgrading the storm systems, the stormwater management systems. Two big areas, the Midland area, the Poplar area, those areas right now are being looked at, as well as other creeks. The damage impact afterwards was huge. I know that the police department and with Larry's assistance, his help of trying to get residents to report that with the online reporting or in-person reporting.
And businesses.
Absolutely.
So, in closeout, if I understand correctly, and I think it's important while we're talking about that safety, I believe nobody had any significant injuries. That's correct from all our police reports.
Correct.
So
Not in Delaware County.
Right, not in Delaware County. So we were lucky, but there were too many close calls as you go over that. And Mr. Zienkowski referenced manhole covers. Those are the large lids in the street, in case you're not aware what that is. And the pressure of the water can actually blow a heavy lid off. And under the cover of water, somebody could walk through, go right underneath, and obviously you would not be able to survive that. So the other point I wanted to stress, besides just not driving your car through flooding, because when you think of drowning, often people think of swimming at the beach. You can actually drown driving your car through those flooded areas. Several of the rescues were with children in the car. So in our small township, 28 water rescues is a very significant response. I definitely have to acknowledge the Radnor Fire Company, the Bryn Mawr Fire Company, and the police officers and public works members for doing their rescues and keeping people safe. And we had to watch out for their safety. I think it's self-explanatory, but Larry, is it a good idea, and what can happen to kids when they want to play or put a raft in standing water or during those flooding conditions?
Unfortunately, some of the fatalities that have occurred in these recent events that we've had, I think we're up to 5 major rain events in June, July, August. And now we're into September, which is traditionally the beginning of our really rainy season. So in those 3 months, there have been major rain events, and there have been fatalities from just that reason, where kids are like, oh yeah, let's go down to the creek and we'll go rafting, or we're just going to go swim, and with that tree swing will work really well now because the water's deep. Not a good idea. I mean, it's something that I learned a long time ago when I was doing urban search and rescue training, and one of the instructors stood up there and he said, I'm going to share something with you, because we were talking about water. He said, there are only two things on the planet, or actually not even on the planet, but two things in the universe that are more powerful than water. That's the sun and an atom bomb. I mean, if you look at it, water has changed the shape of this world. The Grand Canyon, other large features, those are all caused by water. So you really cannot underestimate the force of what water can do to you. But you were saying about the manhole covers, it can even be the drain covers, which you wouldn't think because they have holes in them. But even those will lift up. So where you think there's a drain cover, you step off the curb, in you go. So it's if you can't see the bottom, don't go there.
I think just to add to that with the manhole covers, we have found that they have not only just blown off, but they've actually moved down the street. So if you take an object that weighs 75, 100 pounds, put it in that force of water as it's moving down,
It'll take you out.
It will take you out. It's not a good situation under these events, as well as, again, too, is knowing your surroundings, knowing what's there, what's about, and what's around those particular areas. Because in that rain event, I was down on one of the streets using my truck to block, because we had so much asphalt that actually lifted up under the storm. The water was flowing at probably 3-4 inches over the road, but because of the asphalt road that had lifted up, it made it hazardous. And then those materials are moving down the road too in such a flow rate. Again, someone that's just walking, if you get that impact of a piece of asphalt that hits your foot, hits your leg.
Hit your car.
Exactly, and that's why we were trying to shut down the streets, because the force of this water and the storm actually lifted up a lot of our pavement and
you
created
have
issues.
One of your roadways, obviously you had other ones too, but that, going back to the pumping station.
Exactly.
There was a concrete bridge which had paving on top of it. The paving is 10 feet away from the bridge now. The bridge is completely stripped bare because the force of the water peeled all the blacktop off of the bridge. That's what we're talking about. It's very powerful. It's very strong. You hear the folks on TV say 6 inches of water will float a car. 6 inches of swift moving water will take you off your feet and definitely carry you downstream.
So I think with subject matter experts like you warning the public and really asking everybody to take water safety seriously during a storm, because sometimes it can seem like it could be fun, or you see water running, it could be extremely dangerous to children and adults, and we should not underestimate its capability and stay out of it. Rafts floating in anything on a creekway, we've had a significant injury occur in the township in the past, not in relation to this storm, but we do want to stress that safety when driving and also at home when the police, fire, and EMS people are busy blocking major roadways and conducting several rescues. What we believe could occur is families could really help us by staying much safer in Radnor by following these safety tips. If you have any questions about how to stay safe, please give the police department a call. We'll get you a subject matter expert, come take a look at your property, review the safety tips that we just went over, but we have to really keep control of our kids. Just want to let the audience know as well, sometimes people want to move their cars, but often a gas tank becomes very buoyant when it's water's around it, and it takes cars away, and people can become trapped very easily, and cars do not function properly once the tailpipe is underwater. So it's critically important to stay away from that. And I think Mr. Zienkowski hit on something that's important in the police department. A lot of times during storm, we only have time to put up yellow tape. We don't have time to drive around and put up many barricades, or we simply run out of barricades. People continually drive through them and put themselves at great risk driving through those closed roads. There's a storm and you see yellow tape, you can always bet that there's a significant safety hazard that may not be easily noted by a driver, including high tension power lines that may be down. So we really ask the public to slow down, take time. If there's a big storm, cancel your appointments and try and make another plan. We talked a lot about the emergency that happened on the 13th, the heroic efforts, and the safety tips. But I want to dial in on that's kind of the work is just beginning. And Mr. Zienkowski, is a couple of things. I know that you activated an emergency management person. And I was wondering if you could tell us about that. And also the commissioners instituted a proclamation, a resolution in reference to this particular emergency. I was wondering if you can tell the audience why you took those steps.
Sure. Because of the magnitude of this storm and how we need to have a coordinated effort, we activated our Emergency Operations Center, which is our controlling operational tool that we put into place. Sergeant George Smith, who's in the police department, has a great deal of experience and training in that, to take control of the operation, to make sure it's a coordinated effort, that we aren't duplicating any type of services, because again, our resources are at a level that we don't have excess at all, and we need to make sure that we're utilizing all our personnel strategically and making sure that we're utilizing them very efficiently. We put that into place to try to get a lot of the information, details, coordinate that, try to see a damage assessment of what we had with the proclamation that the township had issued with a disaster. That allowed the township then to submit with the county and work in partnership with the county, in which the governor had established a state of emergency, which then the state released some funds for that, for restoration and cleanup efforts. We will just be submitting for that. We don't know if the state will reimburse on those, but there's a lot of detail that goes into that to make sure we document hours, resources used, equipment used. There's a great deal of documentation that has to take place. So that's taking place behind the scenes as well. The board was actively involved in that storm. I know residents either reached out to the township or they reached out to their commissioners, who relayed the information to us, so we could again sketch out where a lot of these impacts were to the community, as well as infrastructure assessment, which we're going through right now. And we've, I know in our initial review, we have some bridges that were severely damaged, a lot of silting that has gone in the creeks, which now we have actually had the emergency authority to go ahead and begin the process of cleaning out some of these heavily silted in areas. So it's that management of this operation, which is still working right now, as we collect all that data and work very closely with Larry and his staff. It's a great combined effort. The commissioners have their fingers on the pulse of how this is going, and that's why it's so critical for everyone to get information to us, report if they had an impact, which the community has done a fabulous job with. I know I was out this morning, and it will be out later today, but it's almost every day and on the weekend going out, talking to residents, looking at areas and impacts. We've received a lot of video, a lot of photographs of what had occurred. Some of these are some question marks for us, because there's some areas that had not received water before, and that could be something that a tree has come down that is now blocking a creek, that we need to research and find out where that is. A system, it may be a pipe may be crushed, it may be blocked, that we have to get to. So the more information we collect, the better it is, and the EOC is part of that operation. And given some of the storms that I see on the horizon here, whether they make landfall here with some of the hurricanes or the heavy rains that are coming up, we already began the conversation on Monday internally about preparing for these types of weather events that may come to fruition early next week. So we're already in that preparation mode for those, as we're still in cleanup mode.
So the special meeting that the commissioners had and that declaration of a disaster really has meaning, because it has connections to the state and the county level. So it's not just political exercise and federal level. It really has a meaning. And our emergency management system, by activating the EOC manager, allows extra attention to the residents and fine detail because we need to collect a lot of information. And I appreciate that. I think that's very important for the audience to know the activities and the dedication of resources to trying to mitigate this particular storm.
On the board also then too, they waived any type of permit fees. So in the restoration of properties, rebuilding or that, the township will be waiving any type of permit fees to be able to get that done, which is I give a huge kudos to the Board of Commissioners for taking that initiative to do that, and their concern for our community and trying to get things back to some sense of order for a lot of homeowners, which it breaks your heart to go out and see a lot of these, of some of the impact of the water and the storm and what had occurred in the businesses. And it's tough, especially for some smaller businesses, to be able to rebound from something like this. So all the resources that are available and possible through these declarations assist greatly.
Mr. Bach, I'm going to draw your attention to August 31st and September 1st here at Radnor Township, and I'm going to read a statement, and I think it's important for the audience to know this, but Radnor Township will open a disaster assessment and recording center in cooperation with the Delaware County. And I was kind of hoping you could do is break this down to plain speak so people know why we were doing that, why you and your team were working with our EOC manager, George Smith, here at the Township Building on those 2 dates.
It's everything that we do in terms of this. I mean, it all starts. I mean, it all starts with that declaration, which largely that just means that we had an event that either extremely taxed our resources or overwhelmed our resources. Now, it sounds like you guys did some really strong work and you were able to manage through the event. It also sounds like if maybe you had just one or two more things go wrong, you might have started screaming for some help. But you guys got through it, which is commendable. It all begins a process that we have to go through to qualify for the assistance from the state and from the federal government. The governor approved some money, which largely goes to cover the resources that they expended during the storm at the Commonwealth level. They declared a Commonwealth disaster, which allowed them to spend that money. And then, which is kind of similar to what this process does, declaring a disaster here locally will help to cover the expenses that Public Works, Police, Fire, EMS all incurred through the event. But then in order to do the recovery side of it and to maybe get some money for the businesses, for the residents, for the government, because one of the things that we see in a lot of these flooding type events is that the municipal government, they take a big hit because a lot of the stuff that gets destroyed, as Mr. Zienkowski was saying, were public structures, roads, bridges, stormwater infrastructure, parks, playing fields, things like that all kind of get taken out in the event. So we have a number of different silos that are kind of working right now for different pots of money. There's this public assistance piece, which is the money to reimburse municipalities and authorities like the school district and private nonprofits like maybe Radnor Little League. Is that a thing? Okay.
Yes.
Like if their fields got wiped out. So all of the, and they all have to be a 501c3 organization or other private nonprofit organization to get into it. But it helps to restore them. And to do that over the entire county, we have to have $2.1 million worth of expenses. The next piece that comes into play, which is unique because I've been with the county for 12 years and I can never remember the governor saying that he was going to go into this, try to accomplish this. But because of the extreme damages that have been occurred over the last couple of months, they're going to make an attempt, and that's for individual assistance grants. So folks that have had properties that were destroyed or have major damage to them, meaning they're substantial, they're not occupiable, and they have to have substantial repair work done to make them occupiable. That process is underway. And across the Commonwealth, we need to have 250 properties that have that level of damage. And they're pretty sure they've got it because even though it wasn't quite that bad down here, in the other parts of the Commonwealth, it was tremendous. I mean, everybody's seen the videos out of the northern tier and out of South Central of some of the damages that they got. The next piece is through the SBA, Small Business Administration. And there are a series of programs. There's one for individuals and families. There's one for business for real property damage. And then there's also for business, there's an economic injury disaster loan program. Now, all three of those programs are all loan programs, low interest loan programs that are available. To be successful for business or individual families, you have to have an uninsured loss of 40% of the total value of your property. And once you get to that point, then you can then move further along in the process and talk to SBA about getting that loan. Economic injury is something that it's really kind of looking at profit and loss, usually over a similar period from the previous year or previous years. So you'd have to show that, well, usually in August I do this much, and this August because of the rain event I only did this much. And can help you, give you some kind of a loan to help with operating capital to kind of get you over that hump. So those are the different programs. So there's a bunch of different things going on at once. It gets kind of complicated. We lean heavily on local government to help us get these numbers together so that we can demonstrate, because we have to show that we make our mark to PEMA, Pennsylvania Emergency Management, and then they go to bat with us at FEMA. Now, we've been able to set up some site visits for some assessments. The 13th of September, we're doing our individual and family assistance site visit. So we'll have a FEMA team in here wandering around. And then on the 18th, we will have one for public assistance. So, those are the kind of the two deadlines that are out there. So we really need to hear from individuals, families, businesses very quickly. And then for the public costs, which probably be a lot of engineer estimates of the work that has to be done, we'll need to get that back in short order behind that so that we have that. Because like I said, that $2.1 million is tough. I mean, it's all based on per capita. It's like $3.68 per person, across the population of Delaware County. And from what I've seen, I mean, there's quite a bit of damage up here that, may do a good job of getting us there.
So it sounds like it's very important to get whether you're a resident with a private property, a business owner, or anybody in between, it's critical to get this information so that we can record
Yes.
and document it.
Yes, very,
so
very
am
much.
I too late if I haven't done this?
No, not at all.
Okay. So if I look at Radnor Township's website or contact Sergeant George Smith, our EOC manager, and they can use flood@radnor.org or contact our main desk number at 610-688-5600, there's still time to get involved in this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yes.
and I think that's very important, and I
It is.
appreciate, well, obviously Mr. Zienkowski's laid out basically all hands on deck from the commissioners down to every staff member, and we're teaming up with Delaware County, who's all hands on deck, attempting to get the state and the federal government to assist our residences and business owners with financial loss, and possibly even physical labor can possibly be obtained.
And that's actually another good point. Aside from all of this stuff, this monetary stuff that's going on, we have volunteer groups. We call them VOADs, Volunteer Organizations Active in Disaster. And they're largely faith-based groups. They're the Red Cross, the Salvation Army, there's Southern Baptist, Lutheran Disaster Response, Mennonite Men, all different types of organizations. And they come from all over the country. And they come in, and they will come and they will help tear out, muck out, clean out, whatever needs to be done. And some of them will help certain groups, like we've had Team Rubicon up in Radnor before, I think during one of the winter storms. And they particularly they're a veterans group, so they particularly like to go and help veterans. But they'll help anyway. Some of them have restrictions where, they got to deal with the property owner as opposed to a renter. Because if they're going to go into a home and start tearing out drywall, they at least want the owner to go, okay, as opposed to the renter going, yeah, sure, go ahead, not my building. So some of that gets a little sticky, but it can all be worked out. So those resources, they're still available to us. They're still coming in, and we're still taking calls for those. We prefer to have the calls come in through the municipality and then get routed over to us. Like make some lists, and these folks will call and detail the work that needs to be done and get the right teams out there.
So there's actually volunteer census that could even help clean up something, and I think that's very important. So even if you're the smallest resident with the smallest property in your own mind, it doesn't matter. It all counts to us, but we actually have some volunteer avenues that we can employ. Mr. Zienkowski, didn't you guys also authorize our Public Works Department to go outside of their normal collection and pick up debris?
We did. We had for 2 weeks, we were able to go and pick up all the storm-related damage that occurred in people's homes, and we've helped out businesses too. We're here to help out during all these events. We will do whatever we can to assist homeowners, businesses, schools, whatever we can. And the cooperation level has been fantastic. Under these heartbreaking scenarios and situations, the residents have been great with us, have been cooperative. And again, if anybody still has storm-related damaged items, all they need to do is call the township, call the Public Works Department. We will go pick those items up. We know that it's been tough too with some of the heat that's gone on, some of the rain, not to be able to get to that, but we know it's an ongoing situation and scenario.
So again, just like Larry's message, still time in Radnor Township. You need help,
Absolutely.
call into the township, and we're going to come up with a plan.
Absolutely.
And then just to kind of follow up on something that Mr. Zienkowski said, a lot of stuff is in creeks, it's in streams, it's in canals, drainage ditches, whatever you want to call them. If residents see something new, like you said, there's a tree down. Okay, so if there's a new tree down that's in a creek, let them know. If they see, like the creek kind of used to go this way and now it kind of goes this way, let them know. Because this stuff all impacts the way that the water moves through our neighborhoods. I jokingly will tell people that we have the best stormwater management system on the planet. It's called the Delaware River. Our job is just not to get in the way of the water as it's going to the Delaware River. We see it all the time down along the river where if the tide's up, stormwater builds up. As soon as the tide turns and starts going back out, the water goes. So, as long as the water can get down there, it's great. It's when we get in the way of it. And to that point, like, if you see trash can lids, trash cans, anything that's, construction material, anything that's near a creek near a drain, get it out of there, because it will cause problems. The worst thing that can happen to us is when we have the culvert type of a bridge, and somebody's trash can floats downstream and goes right in the plug. That's bad, because you're not ever going to get that out.
And if you're not sure how to handle that, I think in Radnor, we could just simply call into the township building and we'll get a team on it right away.
Absolutely.
We want them to stay on top of that.
And we've had some great feedback from residents because they've pointed out some drainage areas that have been behind homes in areas that you visually from the road you cannot see.
They don't always see.
And they've helped us because we've found some where there were logs and pipes and the amount of trees and just construction debris. There was one of the portable toilets actually was blown out and blown down the creek from this storm.
That happens a lot.
So construction material. There were 2x4s and 4x8s, just floating down the stream. So those types of things is what Larry just spoke about. Let us know those, because we even have some cranes coming in to actually remove some of the bigger trees that have fallen in some of the creeks that we cannot go in and move. Right. That we actually require a tree company to come in with a crane to actually pull these out because of the weight. But it has changed water flows, and these are the types of things we need to know.
Excellent. I think what I'd like to do for the audience is recap where we were. On August 13th, we had a significant flood that affected Radnor Township, Delaware County, and Montgomery County, some of our neighboring communities. With that, we had made 28 water rescues, hundreds of calls for service for the police, and I'm sure probably double for Public Works. Delaware County Emergency Operations Center probably overwhelmed with requests for service, help, and other reasons. Following that, We reviewed some safety tips that Mr. Zienkowski and Mr. Bach brought up to help keep people safe and avoid becoming a possible emergency situation if it floods again or rains again like that, which there obviously is a possibility since we can't control Mother Nature. And those safety tips are very important, and I think we could get those to community groups, schools, whatever. All you have to do is just contact the police department. We'll get that safety message out. But what was really important, and to stress that we got through that, but really the work just began. And Mr. Zienkowski activated the Emergency Operations Center, our emergency management coordinator, George Smith. Mr. Zienkowski went out on the street, and the commissioners created or stated that this was a disaster area, which allowed Delaware County, Larry Bach and his team to come in and begin helping us. We've stated in this very particularly that it's critical that you get the information to us about damage, no matter how small or big. We'll decide how it gets documented and we'll work with you to get through that. But it's not too late, even though we had August 31st and September 1st mass notifications. We had over 35 people come in and report damages. Second phase is we're now working with the businesses to make sure we've collected their information. But if you go to flood@radnor.org or simply call our main number, 610-688-5600, we are going to follow up with you and make sure that your information gets logged in. It's not too late. And then in closing, there's still work to do as far as us working, I believe, with the state government and the federal government. Is that correct?
For the grants and the assistance programs, yes. I mean, the county will coordinate that, and it's kind of our role is to be that coordination agency. But when they come in to do their tours, then we'll start to get an idea of what we're going to qualify for. Oh, and you mentioned that there's a lot of video out there. If we can capture some of that, that goes a long way to convincing some of these agencies that there's a need. I mean, they talk a lot about impact statements, which are written impact statements. But nowadays, with the prevalence of video, you take them to a neighborhood and you show them some video. Well, this is this store, this is this store, this is this store, and they kind of go, "Yep, okay, you're in, we're done." And it gets real painless because they realize what happened just by looking at that video.
So we'd ask you to get that to flood@radnor.org or call our main desk, which we just said, and we'll take some more of that video. Mr. Zienkowski, I know that you sent the studio some video. You thought that was important to get those video images and some of the still shots out to the community, because I think it really captured a lot. I know that I reviewed what you sent over, and what I would stress to the audience, no matter how old or how young, people should view those and take a look at what situations not to get yourself in. There's a video of a water rescue right out in front of the township building.
Correct.
On Ivan Avenue.
Correct.
So I think that was important. Thank you for bringing that, because I think that's very important to show our audience. They've been shared with Delaware County already, but we know there's more information to capture. But please take a look at those videos. Please go over them, take a look at the water levels, and see that people were trapped, they were in danger. You see heroic efforts by the police, the fire department, and paramedics here, and we just want to avoid those situations in the future. We mentioned collecting video recordings of the storm damage that occurred. We want to make sure that the audience is very well aware that we don't want anybody to risk harming themselves or endangering anyone else by capturing video. If you have a static camera or you recorded something from the safety of your living room or a safe position, we want to take that. But we want to make sure that nobody goes to any extraordinary means to collect video that would put themselves or anybody else in danger. So please follow that safety tip. But if you do have video, please forward it to flood@radnor.org or contact our township building, and we will have somebody come pick up the video. As we wrap up, just want to see if any comments you'd like to make in closing, Mr. Zienkowski.
Well, Chris, I want to thank you for doing this, and Larry for being here to help, and Studio 21 for giving us this platform to be able to get information out. It's so critical in these times of emergencies to communicate. If there's an emergency, you feel uncomfortable, dial 911. Do not hesitate. Any type of utilities, smelling gas, power lines being down. Just to stay away. You don't know if it's a cable line, if it's a power line, anything, just to avoid those, call those in. The more information we're getting from the community as this goes on, the better we can respond, the better we can help restore. If power goes down, the quicker we can restore power, try to get PECO's crews out to a specific area. So the more there's a dialogue and communication, I think is very beneficial, and this is very important information to be able to get out. So thank you for doing this.
Absolutely. Larry?
In emergency management, we talk about the emergency management cycle: preparedness, response, recovery, mitigation. We made it through response. We're in recovery, then and that kind of overlaps with mitigation. So as we go forward, just remember, it's all circular. So as we move back out through recovery and mitigation, we're coming back to preparedness. So as we get to that level, it's important that everyone, individual, family, business owner, take the time and make their own personal preparedness plan and have some idea of what you're going to do. If you're a group of people, have a way to communicate. Know where your important documents and things like that are. There's a lot of good resources for preparing personal preparedness. We actually have a gentleman in our office who will happily come out and teach classes in personal preparedness. So, the better prepared the individual is, the more knowledge they have, the better they're going to be able to endure events like this, which apparently aren't going away. So, it's one of those things that we have to deal with. And like I said, and then, in the back part of that, as we go through recovery and get into mitigation, let us know about things, like one of the things that as Mr. Zienkowski was saying, the water rescue that occurred in front of your building, it's one of those old culvert-style bridges that has a very small opening. And, you have to look at things like that and think that, well, maybe we need to replace that and rebuild that with a box culvert, something that'll allow a lot of water to get through. Because I'm sure the park took a hit because of the water backed up. So, just because you haven't fixed the bridge now means that everything that was upstream of that took a hit. So you can solve a lot of problems sometimes if you do that root cause analysis.
Thank you. Let the audience take in all this information. It was a lot. I want to remind you that all you have to do is simply call our township building. We will get you help. We will review all the topics that Mr. Zienkowski and Mr. Bach went over. With the support of the Radnor Commissioners declaring a disaster, authorizing under the lead of Mr. Zienkowski, Emergency Management Coordinator George Smith, and all the township departments working together hand in hand, we have a long road ahead of us still, but we are trying to make progress for every business, every resident, and anybody who is affected in a small way or a large way. I think it doesn't stop there. We need to review the safety tips we went over, the videos, and also talk about being prepared possibly for another storm, because we know it's going to rain again. We know there's a chance it could flood again. We hope that does not happen. But to Mr. Bach's point, everybody has a responsibility to be prepared, because it could be your house next time, it could be your car. We ask everybody to stay safe. Please contact the 911 center. Please call Radnor Township Police if you'd like any of these safety briefings done at your community, your home, or at your school. Ask everybody to stay safe. My name is Christopher Flanagan, Superintendent of Police. Thank you very much.